Give it up for Danielle DiMartino.
Danielle DiMartino.
Danielle DiMartino Booth. All right, folks, the question is getting a little redundant. It's a great time for us to step in here because since our colleague Ed Lawrence asked his question, a small rally is turning into a small pullback. So let's bring back in the Powell Panel. Danielle, I want to start with you. You took a lot of notes when he was asked about being preemptive, and it was interesting, right? He talked about that they have been preemptive in the past, 2019, and admitted they were a little late last year. I would thought those were shocking revelations.
Well, what he failed to mention about the 2019 episode was that in 2018, the CPI was 2.4% when the trade war began. He mentioned that it was 1.6% in 2019, and that therefore the Fed was able to be preemptive in easing policy. But what he omitted, it's the sin of omission, is that the global trade decline was bigger than the inflationary impulse, and that's why the Fed had to come in and ease policy. He's only telling you half the story, but it's a really critical half of the story when you listen to all the businesses out there who are saying, we are going out of business. That's a lot more important than being concerned about being preemptively cautious about potential inflation increases.
Real quick, these listening events he's talking about, who attends them? Can I get an invite? I mean, you know,
I know I can.
Are small businesses there explaining what their situation is?
I certainly hope they are, but the Fed may say that it listens, but it certainly never acts on what it hears.
Ali, you picked up early on Powell not saying data dependent. Finally, it was one of the reporters that mentioned and asked a question, and he said it was complicated.
I think what he's saying is we're waiting and listening, which is the new and improved 2025 pre-pivot party data dependent. I think he got so much flack for being late in terms of the staleness of the data that we're poking holes in, that is his new that is the new term. And I think he did define what he's waiting for, right? He said that they're looking at trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulatory policy. So, in a sense, he has detailed for us what they are looking for that the administration is involved in.
But they're not going to trade immigration. We know deregulation is coming. So those two things he shouldn't be paying attention to at all. Feels like this thing revolves around what the changes in tariffs.
Well, I think he's looking at those as it affects the labor force, right? So he keeps on talking about growth. Growth is not slowing, or, a bullish economy is not. That is not what he's trying to engineer, right. But inflation and labor market strength are derivatives of that. So I think what he's saying is ultimately, fiscal policy could throw us a curveball. Regulatory policy that was supposed to come in hasn't come in. Immigration doesn't seem to be showing up yet in the numbers, but could. So yes, at the end of the day, it's trade. And so then you go to that scale, scope, et cetera.
And Jim, no hurry. He keeps saying that they're in no hurry. Is that whistling past the graveyard?
Yeah, it is. And, let's just review the bidding. The economic growth we've experienced over the last 2 years has been generated by a 7% deficit and debt to GDP of 125%. Danielle touched on a very important point, which is about the global effects that happened in 18 and 19. Look, in Switzerland, the 2-year yield is negative. Deflation in Switzerland. You've got a debt deflation spiral in the second largest economy in the world. Do you think that the United States is just going to be grammatically sealed from this? And then the last thing I keep saying is it's going to take at least 2 years in terms of lag. I mean, one of Danielle's friends, Lacey Hunt, says the lags are up to 4 years, 3 to 4 years. And yet we think that cutting rates today at 25 basis points is going to instantaneously eject itself into the economy. This is a complete and total incompetence on my behalf. It's just hogwash when you start to really parse what he's saying.
Right. Danielle?
So I had a client today ask me a very prescient question because I mentioned in my Bloomberg chat room, I'm like, so listen, there have been 7 large bankruptcies in May. There were 7 large bankruptcies for all of April. One of them was a huge freight carrier with 5,000 to 10,000 creditors and $100 to $500 billion in liabilities. Again, 7 in 7 days versus 7 for the entire month of April. And the question from the client, does he know that these bankruptcies are accelerating and that they're bigger? And that's a question. Again, is he paying attention to what's happening on the ground, or is he putting his blinders on and insisting that monetary policy being overly restrictive is doing damage to the economy in the current backdrop, as was the case in 2018 and 2009 when he was there, by the way.
I think, let me just add something to that. So I think what I heard someone say recently, that capital markets, the stock market, which is a small measure, as we discussed, of a small group of people, is not in any sense in distress, right? People are in distress. And that seems to be getting lost here, whether it's lost in data, whether it's lost in communications. But so when you throw on her 7 bankruptcies in 7 days, you have the lowest M&A rate in 20 years.
Right.
More companies were getting together from their basements in the pandemic.
Right. Yep.
Right. So there, again, the distinction between what markets and politics are viewing versus what the actual human being is experiencing are hugely different.
Yes.
Real quick.
There's enough data out there.
Right.
For him to have air cover, the Fed to have air cover, to start to normalize.
They should use fresh data. I mean, we talk about AI in every industry and how quickly you can get this high frequency information. They wait on the stale government data when no one's taking a survey. The revisions comes another 30 days later, and it's always wrong. Jim, the bottom, but you also said you wish he would stop saying we don't know. So we're saying that he doesn't know.
I got to watch what I say because I have an ex-Fed official at the desk. I'm teasing.
Well, and I used to get a lot of flack because I used real-time data. Oh, you haven't seasonally adjusted it. And I'm like, but that's what's happening in real time. We have to pay attention to what's happening in real time.
Fitch, didn't Fitch just come out and take the forecasts up on terms of in terms of bankruptcies or
yes, the default rate, they just raised
all there. It's all there if you want.
There's 786 PhDs. Somebody can gather real-time data.
Yeah, they all seem to be afraid of their own shadows. All right, well, let's go back to Jay Powell.